The hot Texas sun beat down on Harmony's town square in 1878. Dust swirled around Sarah, a quiet widow, as she stood trapped. Her hands and neck were caught in the heavy wooden stocks, a cruel punishment for all to see. The rough wood scraped her skin, but it was the shame that truly hurt. People whispered and pointed, their faces a blur of angry judgment. They said she had spread bad stories about Mrs. Henderson's pie recipe, but Sarah knew she hadn't. She had only mentioned that Mrs. Henderson used too much salt, a simple observation, not a malicious tale. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the dusty street. Each sob was a quiet earthquake inside her. Her worn calico dress felt too thin, offering no comfort from the harsh glares. She squeezed her eyes shut, wishing she could disappear, wishing the ground would swallow her whole. The humiliation burned hotter than the sun. She tried to make herself small, to be invisible, but the stocks held her tight, forcing her to endure every stare, every mocking laugh. The air felt thick with unkindness, and Sarah braced herself for whatever more cruelty the day might bring. The whispers grew louder, turning into harsh words. "Gossip monger," shouted old Mr. Gable, shaking his fist. A group of women, Mrs. Henderson among them, giggled behind their hands, their eyes sharp and cold. A boy threw a small pebble that bounced off the wooden stocks with a dull thud. Sarah flinched, her body tensing. Each jeer, each mocking sound felt like a fresh stab to her heart. The tears she had tried to hold back now streamed freely down her cheeks, leaving clean trails in the dust on her face. Her throat felt tight, too choked with shame to make a sound. She felt utterly alone, small and broken in front of everyone. The shame was a heavy cloak, wrapping around her, making her feel dirty and worthless. She wished for a strong wind to blow through the square, to pick her up and carry her far, far away from their judging eyes. The sun continued to bake her, but it was the heat of their unkindness that truly scalded her soul. She just wanted the torment to end. All she could do was close her eyes again and wish for a moment of peace, any peace at all. Just when Sarah thought she couldn't bear another second, a new sound cut through the jeers. It was the rhythmic thud of a horse's hooves, growing steadily louder. She didn't dare open her eyes, afraid of what new torment might arrive. But the sounds of the townsfolk lessened, replaced by a quiet shift in the air. A shadow fell over her, deeper and cooler than the harsh sunlight. Slowly, carefully, Sarah peeked open one eye. A tall man sat astride a dark horse, right at the edge of the square. He wore a dusty, dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat that hid most of his face, but she could see the strong line of his jaw. He was a stranger, clearly not from Harmony. His gaze, even from a distance, felt steady and calm, unlike the angry stares of the townsfolk. He looked at her, then at the stocks, and then back at her. There was no anger in his eyes, no judgment, just a deep, quiet look that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. He dismounted his horse with an easy grace, his movements slow and sure, and began to walk towards her. The stranger walked with purpose, his steps crunching on the dusty ground. He stopped right in front of Sarah, blocking out the sun and the cruel faces of the townsfolk. He was even taller up close, and his eyes, now clearly visible, were a deep, kind brown. Without a word, he knelt down. It was a strange sight, a big man kneeling in the dirt before a woman in stocks. Then, with a gentle movement, he took off his dusty, dark coat. The fabric was worn but clean. He draped it carefully over Sarah's shoulders and the wooden stocks, shielding her from the sun and, more importantly, from the prying eyes. The rough wool felt surprisingly soft against her skin, and the scent of leather and open air filled her nose. It was a small act, but it felt like a warm, protective hug. His voice was low and calm, yet it carried across the quiet square. "Release this woman," he said, his words clear and firm. It wasn't a question, but a demand. The townsfolk gasped, stunned by his boldness. Sarah, hidden beneath the coat, felt a sudden, fierce hope bloom in her chest, a feeling she hadn't known in a very long time. Beneath the surprising warmth of the stranger's coat, Sarah felt a mix of strong feelings. Hope, yes, but also a deep caution. Why was he doing this? No one in Harmony had ever stood up for her, especially not in such a public way. She was a simple widow, mostly unnoticed until now. What did this man want? People didn't just help strangers for no reason, not in her experience. She tried to steal a glance at him from under the coat, but he was still kneeling, his back slightly turned to the townsfolk, his body a shield. She could feel his steady presence, a quiet strength that was both comforting and unsettling. Was he trying to make a show? Was he new to town and trying to prove something? Or worse, did he have some hidden bad reason for helping her? Her mind raced, trying to find a catch, a trick. Years of hardship had taught her to be careful, to trust no one easily. Even as her heart yearned for release, a small, wary part of her held back, wondering about the true motives of this unexpected hero. The townsfolk, who had been quieted by Ethan's sudden appearance, now stirred with fresh anger. Mayor Thompson, a barrel-chested man with a stern face, stepped forward. "Hold on there, stranger," he boomed, his voice cracking like a whip. "You don't just ride into Harmony and start giving orders. This woman is being punished for her wrongdoing, as is right and proper." Ethan slowly rose to his full height, turning to face the mayor. His eyes were steady, showing no fear. "Wrongdoing, you say?" Ethan's voice was still calm, but it held a new edge. "And what proof do you have of this wrongdoing that calls for such a public display of cruelty?" Mayor Thompson puffed out his chest. "Everyone knows she spreads rumors. Mrs. Henderson herself complained. We don't need fancy proof to know a gossip when we see one. This is Harmony's way of keeping order, and it's none of your business, stranger." Other townsfolk mumbled in agreement, their angry stares now fixed on Ethan. They didn't like outsiders telling them what to do. The air grew thick with unspoken threats, challenging Ethan to back down. Ethan's gaze didn't waver from Mayor Thompson's angry face. "I understand you have your ways," he said, his voice even and clear, "but even in the wild, a man or woman deserves fair treatment. You say she spread rumors. Did anyone hear her? Did you hold a proper hearing? Or did you just take one person's word and decide to shame her in front of everyone?" He swept his hand towards Sarah, still hidden by his coat. "This isn't justice, Mayor. This is cruelty. No one, not even a simple widow, deserves such public humiliation without clear, undeniable proof. What if someone simply dislikes her? Is that enough to lock them in these?" He tapped the wooden stocks with a firm finger. "A town built on rumor and public shame isn't a strong town. It's a town built on fear." His words, spoken so calmly but with such conviction, made some of the townsfolk shift uncomfortably. They had never thought of it that way. They had just followed what Mayor Thompson said was right, but Ethan's words made them think. His quiet strength was more powerful than any loud shouts. A tense quiet fell over the square. Ethan's words hung in the air, sharp and true. Some townsfolk exchanged uneasy glances. Mr. Gable, who had shouted earlier, now shuffled his feet, looking at the ground. Even Mrs. Henderson seemed a little less sure, her triumphant smirk fading. They hadn't expected a stranger to speak with such sense or such quiet power, but others remained hard and angry. Mayor Thompson's face grew redder. "Are you threatening me, stranger?" he growled, taking a step closer. Behind him, a few young men, eager to show their loyalty, gripped the tools they carried, their eyes narrowed. The air felt thick, ready to snap. It was like two strong winds pushing against each other. Sarah, under the coat, could feel the shift, the fear mixed with stubborn anger from the crowd. She held her breath, wondering if this brave man had gone too far, if his help would only bring more trouble to them both. The courage he showed was inspiring but also dangerous. From beneath the comforting drape of Ethan's coat, Sarah watched him. His back was broad, his shoulders steady. He didn't shout or raise his voice, yet his presence filled the square. He stood against the mayor, against the angry glares, against the very way this town did things, all for her. The thought was astonishing. The fear and shame that had gripped her for so long began to loosen their hold just a little. She saw not a man seeking trouble, but a man seeking fairness. His quiet strength was like a steady flame in the swirling dust. A small, warm feeling started to spread in her chest, pushing back against the cold despair. It wasn't just hope for release, it was a new kind of hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't entirely alone, and that there was someone in the world who cared about what was right. The deep, heavy shame that had weighed her down started to lift, replaced by a flicker of something new, something that felt a little like dignity. Ethan didn't back down from Mayor Thompson's anger. He simply looked at the mayor, then slowly turned his gaze to the crowd. "Think about it," he said, his voice reaching everyone without being loud. "What if it was your sister, your mother? Would you want them shamed like this over a rumor?" A few heads nodded, almost imperceptibly. A young woman near the back who had giggled earlier now looked down at her shoes. "Mr. Abernathy, the blacksmith, a man known for his fairness, folded his arms and looked thoughtfully at the ground. Ethan's words, so full of common sense and a quiet plea for fairness, were like small stones dropping into still water, making ripples. They stirred doubts in the minds of those who hadn't truly thought about the punishment before. They had just followed the crowd. Now, they started to wonder if the mayor's judgment, usually so firm, was truly right this time. The anger in the square began to mix with a new feeling, uncertainty. Mayor Thompson saw the shifting eyes, the murmurs of doubt among his townsfolk. He knew he was losing control of the situation. His face was still red, but a new, calculating look entered his eyes. He couldn't afford to look weak, especially to an outsider. He cleared his throat loudly. All right," he boomed, trying to sound as if he were still in charge. "It seems our visitor has made his point about fair treatment. While I stand by our town's ways, I am also a man of reason." He gave Ethan a stiff, resentful nod. "Very well, release the woman. Let this be a lesson to her, and to all of you, about the importance of truth and consequences." He made it sound like it was his idea all along, a show of mercy rather than a forced retreat. The young men who had gripped their tools now looked confused, but they didn't argue. A deputy, a thin man named Jade, stepped forward with a large iron key, his eyes darting between the mayor and Ethan. He moved towards the stocks, the metal key glinting in the sun. The deputy's key turned with a loud asterisk clunk, and the heavy wooden top of the stock swung open. Sarah's arms and neck, stiff and aching, were finally free. Ethan was there instantly, his strong hands gently steadying her as she stumbled forward. He didn't rush, letting her take her time, still keeping his coat draped over her. As she stepped out, the sun felt different, less harsh, almost welcoming. The stares of the townsfolk still lingered, but they no longer felt like burning coals. They felt distant, weaker. The heavy cloak of shame that had weighed her down for hours lifted completely. She wasn't the gossip monger they had called her. She was Sarah, a woman who had been unfairly treated, but who had found an unexpected champion. With Ethan by her side, standing tall and quiet, she felt a profound sense of dignity wash over her. She was no longer a victim. Her chin lifted a fraction, and her shoulders, though still sore, straightened. A silent strength bloomed inside her, a feeling she hadn't known she still possessed. Sarah stood free, still wrapped in Ethan's coat, the scent of him a comfort. She looked up at him, her eyes still a little red from crying, but now filled with a different light. The words felt stuck in her throat, unfamiliar after so much silence and shame. "Thank you," she finally managed to whisper, her voice a little rough. It was a small sound, but it held all the gratitude of her heart. She was still a little unsure, a lifetime of being overlooked making it hard to fully accept such a grand act of kindness. Why had he done it? What did he expect in return? These questions still buzzed in the back of her mind, a quiet echo of her past fears. But beneath that wariness was a deep, warm feeling of thankfulness. His kindness was like a cool drink after a long, hot journey. She looked at his kind brown eyes, trying to read them, to understand this unexpected hero who had appeared out of the dusty Texas landscape. His presence alone made her feel safe, a feeling she had almost forgotten. Ethan simply nodded, a small, kind smile touching his lips. He didn't ask for thanks, nor did he look for praise from the still-watching townsfolk. His gaze was steady on Sarah. "No need for thanks," he said, his voice soft, almost a murmur meant only for her. "I just believe in fairness. What I saw here wasn't fair. No one should be treated like that without proof, without a chance to speak." He gestured vaguely at the empty stalks, now looking like a sad, forgotten toy. "It didn't sit right with me, simple as that." His honest words were like cool water washing over Sarah's lingering doubts. There was no hidden agenda in his eyes, no demand for repayment. He truly believed in fairness, and he had acted on it, even when it meant standing alone against a whole town. The last threads of her mistrust began to unravel, replaced by a deep respect. He wasn't a hero for glory, but a man of simple, strong principles. That was a rare thing to find. With Sarah Freed and Ethan's calm words echoing, the crowd slowly began to break apart. Mayor Thompson huffed once more, then turned and stomped away, his authority bruised. Mrs. Henderson, still cross, gave Sarah one last dirty look before hurrying off. Some of the men and women grumbled softly as they walked, not happy that an outsider had questioned their ways. Their anger, however, had lost its fire, turning into a simmering resentment, but others left with thoughtful expressions. Mr. Abernathy, the blacksmith, paused to look back at Ethan and Sarah, a nod of quiet approval in his eyes. The young woman who had looked down at her shoes earlier now avoided her friend's gaze, her mind perhaps replaying Ethan's words about fairness. The town square, which had been so full of harsh judgment, slowly emptied. The dust settled, leaving behind an unusual quiet. It was clear that what had happened that day would not soon be forgotten in Harmony. It was a crack in their usual way of doing things, and some felt it more deeply than others. The square was almost empty now, just the two of them standing beneath the vast Texas sky. The silence that had once felt heavy with judgment now felt peaceful, almost sacred. Sarah looked at Ethan, and he looked back at her. No words were needed. In his steady gaze, she saw a quiet understanding, a shared moment that went deeper than any spoken thanks. The sun, lower now, cast long shadows across the dusty ground. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the lone mesquite tree nearby. It was a simple moment, but powerful. They were two strangers, brought together by an act of injustice and an act of courage. In that shared quiet, something new began to stir between them. It wasn't loud or sudden, but a soft, warm thread, weaving a connection where there had been none before. It was a feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in a very long while. For Sarah, it was like finding a safe harbor after a long, lonely storm. The silence stretched, not awkward but comfortable. Sarah finally broke it, her voice softer now, less rough. "Sir," she began, then hesitated. "Ethan. My home is small and I don't have much, but I'd be honored if you'd share a simple meal with me. It's the least I can offer for what you did." She looked at him, a genuine invitation in her eyes, a gesture of true, heartfelt thanks. It wasn't just about food, it was about acknowledging his kindness, offering the only comfort she had to give. Her small home, just a short walk from the square, felt like a safe haven now, a place where she could finally rest. Ethan had saved her from public shame, and now she wanted to offer him a private moment of peace. It was a simple offer, born from a deep sense of gratitude and a quiet desire to understand the man who had shown her such unexpected goodness. She hoped he would accept. Ethan accepted Sarah's invitation with a quiet nod. Soon they were seated at her small, clean table, a simple stew simmering on the hearth. As they ate, the initial shyness slowly faded, replaced by easy conversation. Ethan spoke of his travels across Texas, of vast plains and lonely trails, of hard work and honest people. He didn't boast, but simply shared his experiences. Sarah, in turn, found herself opening up, talking about her life in Harmony, the challenges of being a widow, and even the simple joys she found in her garden. She spoke of her late husband, a kind man, and the quiet life they had built. Ethan listened carefully, his eyes warm and understanding. They discovered they both valued honesty and a fair shake, and both had known their share of hardship. In the soft lamplight over the simple meal, they found common ground. A feeling of mutual respect grew between them, quiet and strong, like the roots of an old oak tree. The table, though small, felt wide enough to hold their growing connection. As the evening deepened and the lamplight cast a warm glow, Sarah looked across the table at Ethan. Her initial worry about his intentions had completely melted away. In its place was a profound feeling of admiration. She thought back to the town square, to the moment he knelt before her, to his steady voice demanding her freedom. It had taken immense courage to stand against an entire town, especially as a stranger. His kindness wasn't just a fleeting gesture, it was a deep part of him, shining through his calm eyes and thoughtful words. He was a man who truly believed in what was right, and he wasn't afraid to act on it. Sarah, who had spent so long feeling small and overlooked, felt her heart swell with respect. Her initial mistrust, a shield she had worn for years, had crumbled. She saw not just a rescuer, but a truly good man whose quiet bravery had given her back her dignity. This admiration was a strong, steady warmth inside her. Sarah's admiration for Ethan was clear in her eyes. Sensing her thoughts, Ethan met her gaze, his expression gentle. "You know," he said, his voice a soft rumble, "when I rode into that square, I saw more than just a woman in stocks. I saw someone enduring something terrible, but with a quiet strength about her. Even with the tears, you weren't broken." All that. He paused, a thoughtful look on his face. Most folks, when shamed like that, they either fight back loud or collapse completely. But you just held yourself. There was a dignity in your silence, even through all the pain. He reached across the small table and gently touched her hand, a brief, comforting touch. "That's what drew me, your strength, even when they tried to take it from you." Sarah's heart fluttered. To be seen not as a victim but as strong was a gift beyond measure. His words filled her with a warmth that spread through her whole being. It was an admission that spoke not just of his good heart, but of his keen eye and deep understanding. As Ethan's hand lingered on Sarah's, a spark ignited between them, soft but unmistakable. It wasn't just friendship growing, but something deeper, something touched by the raw emotion of the day. His defiance in the face of the town's cruelty, his unwavering belief in what was right, had not only saved her from shame, but had also shown her a strength she hadn't known existed. He had given her back her dignity, and in doing so had opened her heart in a way she thought impossible. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her, a feeling both new and comforting. It was a love born not from easy smiles or shared dances, but from a moment of harsh injustice and brave resistance. It was a love that understood hardship and cherished fairness. Ethan, too, felt the pull. Her quiet strength, her gentle spirit had touched him deeply. In that small, lamplit room, a quiet, powerful affection began to bloom between the widow and the stranger, a testament to courage and the unexpected beauty of standing up for what is right. As the hours passed, filled with quiet talk and shared understanding, Sarah and Ethan felt a deep sense of belonging with each other. The world outside, with its harsh judgments and lonely roads, seemed far away. Inside Sarah's small home, a new kind of future was taking shape. They both knew that life in harmony, or wherever they might go, would still have its challenges. But facing them alone felt impossible, while facing them together felt right. Ethan spoke of his plans, of maybe settling down, building something more lasting than the temporary camps of his travels. Sarah, in turn, found herself dreaming of a life no longer shadowed by loneliness, a life where her quiet strength was valued, not overlooked. It was a simple decision, made without grand promises, but with a deep, knowing certainty. They would journey forward, side by side, finding comfort in each other's presence and strength in their shared spirit. The defiance that brought them together had blossomed into a love that promised a future of companionship and unwavering support. Later that evening, as the last rays of the sun painted the Texas sky in hues of orange and purple, Sarah and Ethan stood together outside her small cabin. The air was cooler now, carrying the sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine. They watched the sun dip below the distant horizon, casting long, peaceful shadows over the land. Sarah leaned her head gently on Ethan's shoulder, a gesture of trust and comfort she wouldn't have dreamed of just hours ago. He put his arm around her, holding her close. The shame of the morning was a distant memory, replaced by a quiet joy and a hopeful peace. This wasn't the end of a hard day, but the beautiful beginning of something new. For Sarah, it was a future where her dignity was cherished. For Ethan, it was a place to belong, a home. Together under the vast, star-strewn Texas sky, they faced their new beginning hand in hand, ready for whatever life might bring.